Hello everyone and welcome. I'm Michaela. I'm a 3D designer currently working in the gaming industry, and I've decided to create VFX Lab to help all new artists or advanced to learn more about the VFX art. If you want to start a career in the field or you want to learn more techniques, please do subscribe and follow my Facebook page where you'll find under in the description. This is where I will be posting all my announcements along with the informations, feedbacks that I give, and much more. I will be teaching you a variation of softwares such as Maya, ZBrush, Substance Painter, Photoshop, Nuke, After Effects, and much more. I'll teach you how to create realistic environments, cartoonistic or low poly, how to animate, make dynamics, how to lighten and render a scene, how to compositing, how to editing, and much more. So I hope you find this page very useful for you and that's something you're really looking forward. Please join me in this journey and I will do my best to help you out. And with that, let's jump into the actual tutorial. Hey everyone, and thank you for your time. So now we'll start with Maya Lesson 1 for beginners. I will have a bit of theory at the beginning, which I will explain a bit about the software Maya, what's Maya, where it's been used, and what you can achieve within Maya. And after I explain these couple of things, I will jump into the practical part. If you don't want to hear about it because you already know them, or because you don't want to listen to me talking for a bit, you can jump right into the practical part, but I think it's important to understand the software and what you can do within it. And with that, I will give an advice. For me, I believe it's important to understand the software that you're using and all the stuff that you can do within it, because you can copy paste someone doing something and get all the skills and tips they give you, but that doesn't mean you will be able to always create it on yourself later. Mainly because new artists does actually fall into that trap. They try to copy paste tutorials they see around, and at that time, yeah, it does make sense, but when they try to create something on their own, something goes wrong and they don't really know how to fix it, and they searching around the internet to find the solution. And yeah, sometimes you might find the solution, but sometimes maybe you don't find the solution, because to create something you need to understand it, to know how it works, what can break it, what can be okay with it, because the more you're working with the software, you create many of things, means that you need to combine other stuff as well. So to me, it's very important to understand what you're doing before you start the actual project. So Maya, it's a software that is being used in the industry, filming, animation, and in many cases for games, especially if there are like small companies that they create like 2D games or small mobile games. Big ones that use working for consoles like PlayStation, Xbox, usually they work with 3ds Max. But that doesn't mean that you cannot start with Maya. Now, what you can create with Maya? You can create models. You can create characters, humans, animals, creatures. You can create environments, houses, mountains, cars, airplanes. Whatever your imagination, it can be achieved in Maya. If you have a character and you want to animate, because you want to be an animator later, someone needs to rig the character that you're going to animate, which means that you having a character, let's go with a human, and the rigging artist is the one who creates the skeleton, add all these joints into the character and bind them together. So the animator will be able to create animations and movements such as moving the head, the hands, the arms. All those are joints that have been created from the rigger. So model, rigging and animation are three things that you can create within Maya. Dynamics, it's also something you can create. Nowadays they use a lot Houdini for dynamics, but there are times smaller companies that they don't use Houdini, they will create dynamics with Maya, for example. Dynamics such as water simulators, for example, you will create them within Bifrost. Bifrost is a nice tool that it's existing in Maya. You can create waves, you can create splashes and so on. You can create with fluids, other stuff, let's say fire, explosions, and cloth. It's nice for clothing. Let's say you have a window with curtains, you can create a bit of air, and this dynamic will give this realistic look of air is hitting the curtain and it's moving. You can also create motion graphics with Mush, and this is something that I'm showing on my intro channel. If you see these tubes, for example, and these characters that moving and dancing, all those were made with Mush. And also you can create a lighting. Now lighting is something, if you want to deliver a final piece, let's say that you're working fully on a scene from zero, like create an environment, lighting, rendering, compositing, and deliver the final look. Which means in the pipeline, usually it's nearly at the end, you light in the scene, you create all the lights, get all this mood that you want, if it's a dark, if it's daytime, if it's in an inside house, and so on. And then rendering. Now rendering is on its own a different chapter. This is where you have to set everything, get all your maps that you want to render out, to move them to a compositing software such as After Effects or Nuke. Nuke is used a lot by big companies and some smaller ones. All those things I will be explaining them later on. You need to keep in mind that Maya isn't just one software. The industry doesn't use only Maya. Maya is the main one where you start your project, but then you combine it with different softwares. If you have a house, you need to create the textures for it. There's plenty of ways to create them. One of the softwares is Substance Designer or Substance Painter. You create there the textures, and then you apply them on your model. This goes for the cars, the airplanes, or the characters. For the modeling, doesn't mean that you have to create the models within Maya. Many artists work with Maya and ZBrush. ZBrush is a software for sculpting. You can create from zero your character there. Many times the character starts from Maya, they get the low poly, and then they go to ZBrush. The reason they do that is when you have a creature, for example, and you have all these small details to give the realistic look, you're not gonna model it and keep it as it is, which is gonna be like millions of polys in Maya. You're gonna create the basic shape of it, you're gonna transfer it to ZBrush, you will start sculpting all the details over there, and then you're gonna export the map from there and combine it with the low poly. So you're keeping a reasonable number of polygons within Maya, but all the details you want from the map. Don't worry about it. The moment we reach there, I will be explaining exactly how we do it and the reason we do it in more depth. Okay, I think that's all about Maya. I explained where it's been used, how it's been used, what it does create, and if you still want to work with Maya, because this is all you want to learn, let's start with the official practical tutorial. So, as an artist, when I start my Maya, and let's say that I'm creating my first project, I need to do a couple of things to make sure that all my work is going to be organized and save me time. What does that mean? I will create a folder here, and I will name it Maya Lesson 1. Anyway, this is where I will have all my folders for dynamics, for assets, for the scene, for textures and all. Now, you need to go to the file and go to project window, click on that, and you will see this new window, new tab open. You can see current project name is default. We're gonna change that to the project name. I'll press new here and I will type Maya lesson 1. This is the folder's name now. I will choose where I want to save that, and I will explain right now why I do that. I will save it here. You select that and select. Primary project location has scenes, assets, image, source images, clips, scripts, movies, and all the things you see here. All those are different folders. Why we do that now? You have in a whole scene with hundreds of assets, houses, trees, cars, streets, whatever you can imagine. And you have textures for them, or you created a texture and you want to save it somewhere. If you create a project and do a save as, single save as, you can select where you want to save it. That's fine. When you open though the folder later, when you open your Maya scene again from where you saved it, and you save a new texture on a folder that you created outside of Maya, when you have to apply this material on the object, you have to go and search for the folder, which is gonna take you a couple of minutes if you have hundreds of projects and you don't remember exactly where you saved it. You will have to search for it. By making this project window here, everything is gonna be there. A file path is created, which means when you save a tree texture into source images here, which this folder is going to be created once I press accept. The moment you want to apply this texture, you won't have to search for the folder. It takes you directly there, which means the only thing you need to do is just select the texture. That saves you a lot of time, and it's very important. It keeps everything organized. And one more important thing, very, very important. When you create on your own a folder outside of Maya and you save everything there, something happens in the future and you have to move your folders. The moment you move your folders away, you break the file path. You have to repath everything step by step. By creating that, you know exactly that all your textures, for example, are in one place. If you save them on your own, you might save your textures in 5 different folders. And you can imagine that the more you have, the more complicated it becomes. You forget what you save and where, you delete by accident a folder, you lose everything. You keep them organized, saves you time, and this is the right way to work in the industry. So keep that in mind, it's very important. This is why I keep talking about it. You really need to remember that. Once you name it, when you select the location, you press accept. And let's say that I want to have a save as of the project that I'm having. It's empty, it doesn't matter. I go to save scene as, and you can see here, it takes it directly. I don't have to search for the folder. It knows exactly what it is because there is a file path for it. And I will name this Maya lesson 1. And I will show you now what you see. If I go here, this is the folder we created within Maya. I click on that. You see all these folders? Your Maya scene is going to be here, scenes. If I click, Maya scene lesson. I didn't have to go outside of Maya, search for this folder, open it, go Maya lesson, go to scenes, save it here. It did it on its own. It's organized. Please do remember that. It's very important. Couple more things that I need to tell you about Maya to have in mind. It's the preference window. If you go here, as you can see, this little guy with this gear, whatever it is, click on that and you see a new window. A couple of things that I usually have in mind is the frame rate here. It's for the animations, the renderings. Let's say that you have in a 2 minutes animation or just a moving camera. You select the frames you want. Very important. You will understand later why it's so important. Undo. If it's not on an infinite, put them there. You might be working for 5 minutes on an object and something is wrong and you want to go back a couple of steps. If you press Ctrl Z and instead of infinite you have infinite and maybe it's 5, that means it will only allow you 5 steps behind. And that's not good because you work for 5 minutes and most probably you need to go back to the second minutes you were working. Infinite is the best solution for you. Settings here. Sometimes the up axis is to the Z, make sure it's in Y, and I will show you once we close it here. What else should I show you? If you're doing rendering later on, you have to be sure that enable color management is on. So I will advise you to click it right now. When you have all your changes here, press save. That means it keeps everything you've done. Now, why did I say to go for Y axis? This is mainly, you see this grid here? Wherever you import as an object will be here in the grid. And this grid works in 3 dimensions. You can see here we have the Y, we have the X, and this is the Z. So if I import something now, it's straightforward because it's following the Y. It means the high is gonna be there. If I change it now, just to show you, it changed already. It doesn't follow the right direction. And that's wrong because then you have to rotate it. And you don't want to lose time with that, so make sure you have them correctly selected by Y. Alright, so I will be explaining you now. This is the perspective. You can work around here, you can move your camera to see your object in 3D dimension. Let's have one object just to have an idea. But there's more ways to work around. Later on, when you have more objects and you need to change something and be very precise of what you're doing, you're gonna need to use the top view, side view, back or front view. The way to do that is by going here. You see these 4 pictures? This is a perspective one. You can have 4 windows. This is top, side, front, and so on. No, top, front, side, sorry. So if I select this object, you can see it from different angles, but here you cannot move your camera around, only here. If I select something from here, you see it depending on the angle you're using. This is very useful for you for later when you have something more complicated. So a cylinder now is not gonna help you around, but it's good to know how to open your windows. You can also have them into 2 views, perspective and front, for example. Now, of course, you can change it. You have the front, but you want to have perspective and the side one. All you need to do is to go to this small camera here, right click, and choose the side you want. Now we have front, let's go to the side. So if I select something here, you'll see them from the side. I hope that's something clear. One more thing you need to know is the outliner. This is everything you're gonna have here. You import an object, it's gonna be here. So the cylinder here, it's on the outliner. If I create a lighting, it's here. So everything that existed in the Maya as an object or lighting or dynamics or whatever you create, really, they're gonna be here in the outliner. You can rename them, you can group them, you can make it very organized, and I will show you that how to do it shortly. So now I will go back to perspective, and I will show you how to import a couple of default objects and work around with them. You can see here polymodeling. This is where you're gonna have your defaults that usually when you start a character or a model or a house, car, or wherever, you start with one of these default objects. You can create a sphere, you can create a cube, you can create a cylinder, a cone, and so on. All you need to do is just make sure you are clicking the polymodeling, and then all you have to do is just click the model you want. I will keep the cube here, and I will show you now how to move it around, how to rotate it, how to scale it. First of all, you need to select by left click onto the object. You see over here we have the arrow. Arrow is basically not selection, you just doing whatever else. This one here with the 4 arrows around the cube, it's the move tool. So if I click on the cube, you see these 3 arrows? This is the move tool now. You can move it by y-axis, which is height. You can move it by z-axis here. You can see them here as well. So if you're not sure what you really want to move, just check them around. So y is the green one, z is the blue one, and x is this one. You can also rotate it by clicking this one here, and you can see again you can rotate it by axis, and the scaling, which is this one. Then again you scale it by axis, y, z, and x. It's pretty simple. When you're importing, before that, allow me to show you the shortcuts. When you're working in the industry and you're having a strict deadlines, you need to finish very fast. And by taking your mouse over here, trying to select that and do that, it takes you only like a second or 2 seconds. It's not much of a time, but when you have to make too many things, you know, it adds on the time. So if you want to move the cube, all you have to do is press W. W is the shortcut for move tool. You can press E for the rotation, or you can press R for the scale. When you're creating a model by importing a default, you need to go to the attribute editor here. If you don't have it, so let's say you don't have the attribute, you can find it over here. You just click on here. If you don't remember which one is the right one, just click all of them till you find the attribute editor. By the time you will remember it. If you go to the polycube, which is here, you can change the shape of it. You can change it by here, or you can change the default by here, by width, height, and depth. I can go by 2. The height, which is the Y, it could go by 5, and depth it could go by 2. It doesn't really matter if you use them or you just scale them around, because all the time the default never stays as it is. It changes shape right away. Now you're gonna ask what's subdivision. Subdivision is when you add edge. I'll show you what it is by adding a couple of them. All those edges are something that helps you to modify the model. No matter what you use, if it's a cylinder, if it's a cone, cube, sometimes you need that in order to move it around and change the shape. This works the same for all the objects. So we have it here. Polycylinder, it changed the name from poly and then it adds polycube, polycylinder, polysphere, and so on. You go here. Of course, now you don't have the depth, and like here you have width, height, depth. This change is different type of thing. You have radius, which is the circle, how you want it. You can go by 0.05 and make it smaller, thinner, and the height you can choose whatever you want. Subdivision axis is exactly the same. You just add more edges. You can always have none, but then it changes shape as well. This is something that I will be showing you later for low poly characters or environments and assets. But I would like you to remember those for the time being. Okay. We delete them by selecting an object and pressing delete. You just take it away. Let's say that we want to start changing the shape of it. So we're gonna start changing the shape of the box. Let's say that we want to have a chair, a simple chair. This is a cube. A chair has legs, it has the way that the place that you sit on it, and then it has the back, right? You can scale it up by y-axis. If you press this middle box here, it scales the whole thing together, makes it thinner, smaller. Now, for duplicate any type of object, you can go by edit and duplicate. That means in duplicate, you can see it here, it has p cube 1, p cube 2. All you have to do is just move it around. There's a shortcut for it as well, which saves you time by, instead of going edit, you select the object, you press Ctrl D, first Ctrl then D, and it duplicates it. There is also one more thing. If you want to make this hundreds of times, but you don't want to have all these polygons because everything is going to be the same with the original, all you have to do is select the first one, which is going to be the original, go to edit, duplicate special, click on the small box here you see, and instead of copy, make it instance. It means that it copies everything from the original, but it's not an actual thing. Everything comes from the original. And then duplicate special, I have posted as -1. I'll go back to 1. If you're not sure that everything is right, go to edit, press reset settings just to be default, and then click on instance, and then duplicate special, and you see a second one. Now if you want to continue duplicate the same object over and over and over again, and you want to have a specific space, let's say that I want this one to be here, I want this one to be here. If I press Ctrl Shift D, it does a special duplicate. I move it. If I do the same again, Ctrl Shift D, it does the same. But let's say that I want to go from here to over here in a matter of seconds. How can I do that? Press Ctrl Shift D one more time, take this, and then Shift D. It will follow exactly the same distance, and you can go as many times as you want. This saves a lot of time, especially for something big. Let's say you have hundreds of stuff that you want to duplicate them and you want them to be exactly the same thing. And I will tell you why it's even better. I will... if you're lost and you don't know where is your object, if you select your object from the outliner and press F, it takes you exactly where you selected. So it's good to keep in mind that, a good shortcut as well. I will change the shape like that. And now I want to rotate this, not move it, rotate it with a special duplicate. many times the same distance. How am I gonna do it? I press E, Control Shift D once, I rotate it like here, and then I will press Shift D over and over again. It has exactly the same distance except the original and the final one. All the rest are exactly the same. So that's a good thing to keep in mind. Nice shortcuts. So I have talked to you about W move, E rotation, R for scaling, F for coming here, back to the object, Control D for duplicate, Control Shift D for special duplicate. Control Shift D is going to work only as a special duplicate instancer only if you select the instancer from where I showed you. So make sure you have selected that and not just as a copy paste, as a copy. And if you select Shift D, it creates the exact same distance. Before I change the shape of this to a chair, I will give you a couple of more shortcuts that I think are important for you. And press 1, you see what you have here. You see the gray coloring here, you see the object as full. If I press 2 or 3, with 2 you see what's the original object. It's a cube, but inside it's a sphere. This is because we press the smooth pretty much. So if I go with 3, it smoothes the object. This means that when you have a high poly or an object that you don't want to have a hard edge, you're gonna press 3 and this is gonna smooth the edges. Now it's like a kind of an egg, I would say, because we don't have many edges on the side to keep it the right form but smoother. I will show you how to do it. Press 1 to go back to the original shape. If I press 4, you see the actual shape of it but with no material or anything. By pressing 5, you go back to the original shape, but you go back to the original material. So 1 is for the shape, 5 is for the material. I will add a texture on it to make it more clear. I press 5, press 5, you don't see any texture. I press 6, that's when the HoloMaya show you all the objects with the textures. Sometimes you don't want to see the model with the textures because it confuses you a bit and you want to work around with the actual shape without the material, so you just press 5. So we set 1 for to see the actual shape of the object, 2 to see how it's going to be smooth and how is the original, 3 it's the smooth one, 4 is when you see the object without any filling, 5 is when you see the actual material of the object, and 6 when you want to see the object with the textures. And I will repeat one more time. W for move, E for rotation, R for scaling, F for coming back to the object that you selected, 1 for the shape, 2 for the original shape and how it's going to be smooth, 3 for the smooth object, 4 for the object without any filling, 5 with simple material, gray, no textures, 6 with textures. And now let's go to the final part where I will show you how to work around with the objects. Don't worry about what I'm doing now, I will be explaining them later. We have in the chair we want to make, so I change the shape by scaling up and all. I will Control D once go here, select both, Control D, go here. We have the legs. Now I need to sit somewhere, right? I will create a new cube, move it a bit, scale it down by Y, move around, center it somewhere. Now I will show you how the Maya views and angles work. You remember this part here when you can use in the perspective like now and then go and use top, side and all? I will be using the 4 pictures, 4 views. This is the top view. So now it's easier for me to work with the top view to make sure that this is also something very nice to know. Channel box. You can rotate everything you have from here by pressing a number, and it's going to rotate them by the bedding, by X, by Y, by Z. This goes for the scaling as well, and the translate, which is the move. So now we have it here, I can move it around more. I'm going back to 0 because it seems like I rotated a bit by accident before. We have this chair and we want the sides to be connected. There's 2 ways to do it in that case. You see this, let's press 4 just to see. You see this color in here? Those are the edges. You can have a right click, edge, and by selecting both, you can move them and drag them. You can also rotate them or scale them. And you can do the same for here. By pressing W, which is the move, you can move around. You do it the same here, and you do it the same here. So we took everything. Now press space, it takes you back to the 4 windows, so you can have the perspective as well. I move it here. This is one way. Another way you can do exactly the same thing is by using the vertices. I will be introducing you edges and vertices now, because this is something that helps you to modify later shape. By left click, object mode, that's when you stopped changing the form of an object and you leave it as it is. Now we are back to the original. Right click, and instead of edge, you're gonna do vertices. And vertices are this tiny, small, pinky coloring, reddish coloring. I'll show you here what they are as well. This is where the edge is connecting. So this edge and this edge is connecting with these vertices. And you can move it around and change the shape. So if I click and select both of them, I can drag them, and the other side, and I can drag them. Now you might ask me why I need to select all vertices when I can do it with edges. Correct, you can do this with both ways. It depends on the complexibility of an object, what you're gonna use. Is it gonna be a vertex? Is it gonna be an edge? Depend on what you achieving later. I'm just showing you around ways to drag stuff around. I press space, I go back to the perspective. Oh, if I press space, because I have already selected the 4 windows, I will go back to that. If I click anywhere here, you can see the windows is selected. If I click here and press space, it takes me over there. If I click space again, it takes me backwards, which I see all the windows. So if I click here and press space, it takes me to the perspective one. Now, you see that it's still on mode for changing the shape. So I need to leave it as an object. So right click, object mode. Now you can move it around as a whole, you can scale it and blah blah. We move it a bit upwards, sorry. And this is where we have the place to sit. I will click 2 of the legs, duplicate them as a special, Control Shift D, and move them upward. As you can see now, the chairs is happening now. I need to put something for the back. Sometimes you can just create a new box, but I find it more convenient when something is going to be similar to just Control D. Why I don't do Control Shift D? I don't want it to be special. I don't want it to be connected to the original. I want it to be a different, a new object. I will scale it, and now I will introduce you the extrude. Extrude is when I will move it a bit. When you want to take a specific part of the object and make it bigger. In that case, I want to take this face to move it around here to create this back place. How I'm gonna do it? I'm gonna select the object. On top of the object, I'm gonna have right click, face, select face, press shift, right click at the same time, and go to extrude face. And you see here, now we have the extrude. With the blue one, I'm gonna drag it and I'm gonna bring it here. Divisions is how many edges you wanna have. Subdivisions. Why do we need that? It's because maybe I don't want the back to be straight. I want it to be to have a bit of bend. So I'm gonna have like 5, for example, edges. If I'm happy with what I have, I go for right click, object mode. I will scale it a bit. Now you see that the tool is at the beginning on the original shape. I extrude it, but it's not centered. And when you're working on an object, usually you want it to be centered. So when you rotate it now, it's going to be different. It's going to be rotated by here. That's where the beginning. But if I scale this one, because it's centered, it's rotate the whole thing. How we center that? You select on the object, you go to Modify, Center Pivot. That's where I selected all, and it's rotating or moving or scaling from the center. Now that I talk about the center pivot, I would like to tell you one more thing about it. There are times that rotating by center is something you want or something you don't mind, but there might be times that you want to rotate it from the edge, no matter which edge is, because you want to touch something for any reason anyway. I will show you how to do that. You can move the pivot anywhere you want within the object. If you press D while you have selected the object, you can see here this small vertex, this small yellowish one, and then you have the axis, the move and rotation. Now the thing is that I will move it about here, and if I click V and keep it, hold V and move it, drag it, it takes you to points. So if I want to go right into the edge, I can do it by V. You can move it freely by just dragging it and leave it wherever you want, or you can hold V and just move it. Right now it's exactly at the bottom of the box, and I can rotate it from there. See how it works? If I want to go back to center pivot, I will just click here and I center it again. It all depends of what you really want to do. I'm just showing you around a couple of things, and how you're gonna use them, it's completely up to you in the end. So if I press 3 here, you see that it smooth the object, but it changed the shape. And let's imagine that the chair is woody. So a woody chair wouldn't be that smooth, right? You want to have something smooth. Let's say that you're having something stylized and you want to have a smooth edge, or even realistic one. For whatever reason, whatever art you're making, you don't want it to be that smooth. You want to have the edges, you just don't want it to be sharp. I will show you how to do it. We created edges here to help us change the shape of the back of the chair. We're going to add edges somewhere here to help the edge to be smooth but keep the shape. And now allow me to introduce you to insert edge loop. You go to mesh tools, you select insert edge tool, and you see that it's happening here, it's coming here. If you double click it, it opens this window and it gives you some choices here. You can have a relative distance from edge. This is basically, you can make it freely wherever you want to put the edge. Equal distance from edge, multiple edge loops. If you click on that, you see here number of edge loops. I will show you first what does it does. So you have number 3, I will put number 5. And if I close the window, you see this arrow that is existing in your screen now? If you select on top of any edge, wherever you want, it's either gonna be here or here, it's going to create the number of edge I put on the window. Double click, you see 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If I go to relative distance, the first one, and I select somewhere, you can see I can move it around. I choose where I want to put it. You can put as many as you want. Now that's a trap as well. For new artists, this is the most tricky part, because you're trying to get an amazing shape, you're trying to make a beautiful object or character, and you add all those edges and vertices and you make it so complicated. Well, the more complicated you make it, the difficult is going to be for you later, because the more edges I have, and I will show you by example, the more edges I have here, by double clicking and holding shift, I can select all these edges at once. Double click for one or here, but if I select this one, double click and press shift and double click a different edge, then it keeps all of them together. If I had 20 of edges, you can imagine that I'll have to deselect them and move around, and I will need to work around till I get it perfectly. And of course that takes time, because here we have only 5 edges, but somewhere we might have like hundreds. That's one trick. The second trick that many, I would say new artists fall into the trap, is that they put so many edges to get this perfect smooth object that is pointless. You don't want to have a chair with hundreds of polygons. You can get it with the lowest poly and still get the shape, because all you need to do is start with a basic shape and then start working on that. So I will undo what I've done and I will show you how you can work with that. I will show you two ways that you can smooth it. Just a second. Alright. One way, which I wouldn't really recommend for this case, but sometimes maybe it's more easy for you, is to have the edge loop, select somewhere here and go close enough to the end, as you can see here. Do the same for the other side and do the same for. So pretty much you want from all the sides, all edges, to have an extra edge loop from one and the other side. This is mainly because if you see now that I will press 3 to smooth it, you keep the shape here, but it will change to the rest. I will actually do it here just to show you the top and the bottom. And of course, whatever you do here, now you see by pressing 4, you don't have the material, you don't have the coloring, you only have the edges. This is because sometimes you have so many objects and they're kind of like in between, and you won't be able to see the end of the edge or the vertices. So if you press 4, it helps you to have a better look of what is happening to the hidden places. So here, and then press 6 or 5. Now I will press 3, I will smooth the object, and I will show you the top and the bottom, how different it is. There is not much of difference because half of the edges are following here. But if you want to see here, it's smoother. You keep the shape, but you have a smoother edges. If I had the same object and pressing 3, everything is smoothing and coming together, so it changes the shape on its own. But if you have edges, you kind of control it. It does smooth it, but to the edges. There's a limitation how far it will go. This is one way that you can use it to a couple of objects you made. That's depending on what you're really doing. Some other times, for this specific and simple object, all you have to do is select all the edges on the side, and I will tell you why you're not selecting all edges. I will show you in a bit. First of all, I will show you the right way, and then I will show you what the problem will be if I had selected all the edges. We're gonna bevel the edges now. We're gonna smooth them, but they're gonna have a limitation. All you have to do is press Shift once you finish with your edges. Press Shift and right click, and you go here, bevel edge. Leave it there, release it, and you see now how the shape is changing. It's kind of coming inside. If you change the fraction, it shows how closer it comes. But if you put these segments, it's like the subdivisions, it smoothes. I have 1, so it's still edgy. I put 3, it's becoming smoother. With 3, it's better. 4, 5, let's say here. So you see, you have a very nice smooth edge. And the whole thing is smooth. But if I was selecting all the edges, all the edges, and I was doing bevel, Shift, right click, bevel edge, and let's say this, you kind of get where the edges are. And that depends of how the shape of the object. Sometimes it might be visible, sometimes not that much. But from this angle, for example, you can see the edges. Previously it was the whole thing, all face smooth. Now it is not smooth. You can see the edges here, you can see it here. The more it's becoming a circle, it will be more edgy. So you don't want that. So keep that in mind, how to work around with it. And for this lesson, I have showed you shortcuts, which is W for move, E for rotate, R for scaling, 1 for the original shape and everything. 2, it shows you the shape and the smoothness. 3, it's for smooth. 4, it's for the edges and for the object without filling. 5, it's for a simple gray color where you see the whole thing. 6 is for textures, which I haven't applied here, so you don't see them, but you saw them before. Control D is for copy. Control Shift D, it's for special copy, as long you remember to put it on an instancer and not a copy. And then Shift D, it's when you Shift D once the original, you move the second one to the distance you want. You can put it from the channel here. For example, I have pressed Shift D, I move it a bit, so it's the translation X, and I press 4. This is the distance that it will follow every time I press Shift D. It's equally, there is no mistake on that. If it's 1 semester here, it's gonna be 1 and 1 and 1 and 1. F is for wherever you lose your object. And I will tell you one last thing that I think it's important to remember. And this is something that you won't be needed now, but I think it's good to know it. H. H is when you hide an object. And I will show you here. You see number 5, I will name it lesson. If you press H, it's disabled on the renders and the viewport. If you go here, you see that the coloring is like grayish, it's not white. It means that it is existed, but it's not showing. So you won't be able to render it out. If you want it back into your scene, you just select it and press H again, and it's back. And with that being said, I will leave it here with the lesson for today. I want you to understand, work around with whatever I teach you today. I will give you a bit of practice. I will give you 2 tasks to test your limits. I will question you something, and I would like you to pause the video when I tell you to try it yourself out for once or 2 or 3 times till you figure it out, and then press play to see the final results and how I do it. If you remember correct, now that's a plane. I go to polyplane and I will put them all in 1. I will so my exercise for this one is to you see these edges here? I want to have 2 here and none on top. How can I do that? I want to have only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 edges only. So you need to find a way to have a clean face. Please pause, try it yourself, and I will show you. I hope you did pause it, and I will show you now if you haven't figured out. When you put an edge loop, or when you did for the poly mesh, whatever it is, a mesh, there are times that you don't want to have all the edges. You want to clean up your object. You want to have a cleaner character or house, and just to get rid of anything that is not necessary. That saves you space, and from 1 million polygons you can go to a couple of hundreds. That's a very good one. All you have to do is select the vertices, the edges you want, and just delete them. And that's how you really do it. It's very simple. I will show you a different one now. I want you to change this shape from a cone to be a cylinder from here, but I want it to be cylinder on top of it as well. Without putting this one here, I'll show you what I want it to look like. Don't take a cylinder to do it. I want to create this shape from the cone. I have teach you how to move around the vertices, the edges, how to bevel edge, how to edge loop, extrude, how to work with the attribute editor for the object. So pause this video and try from a cone to create this shape. I hope you have paused the video. I hope you tried it yourself. The reason that I'm telling you to pause the video and try it yourself is because I want you to think for yourself for a bit before I show you the final result. Because it's not that hard. It's getting harder the moment you get scared, when you worried about difficult tasks, but it's the most easiest answers. You start from simple stuff and you build up along the way. So those are very simple exercises that you just put your mind to work, like thinking about how can I achieve that, because I've already gave you the tools you need to do it. All you have to do is to try them out. So if you haven't paused the video and you just wanted the answer, I would suggest, for this at least, please do pause it for a bit. Otherwise, now I'll show you how you can do it and how you can achieve it. So we have this cone here and we want this shape. There's two ways that I can do it. One is to just have for the height subdivision 1. Go for the edge, right click edge, select all the top edges and delete them. See? You got the shape. Now you can go for vertices, move them, and you got the shape. Easy peasy, right? I hope you found this tutorial very useful. It's very basic stuff. People who already have experience at something, they will find stupid, but it's not stupid. They're very important stuff. Before the second lesson, I would like you to try out a couple of things. Try chairs, tables, simple objects. Do not try to go for something complicated. I want you to try the things that I've showed you. Extrude faces, add vertices, edges, move vertices around, move faces, and such as just experience with the software. Do remember how to set a project to create the folders and everything. And I will see you in the next tutorial. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope you learned something from me today. Bye-bye.